First, I'm Claire Howell. Like I said, my experience with herbalism started about 7 years ago. Some of you know I was chronically ill and nothing in Western medicine would help me. I had gone to many doctors and they told me you're fine. And I was like, I know I'm not fine. I don't know what to do with this. So I finally went to go see a natural doctor who introduced me to herbalism, changed my life. For the first time, I was able to get some relief. I started taking some herbalism classes because I was so excited about the progress that I had made. And my first homework assignment, I made, me, having no experience at this point, made a remedy that actually gave me like lasting relief, which I was floored by because I didn't know anything at that point. So it really changed my life as I began to like adapt to a little bit more of a holistic medicine approach and use it for other things beyond my chronic disease, which I now am healed from, so that's awesome. But it launched me onto this path of really wanting to learn more and now share it with others because it's impacted me so deeply. Well, and a lot of the things that are in our backyards are really valuable. And the cool thing with this is one of the things I've found being an herbalist is there's something, I'm a Christian, so from my standpoint, from a faith standpoint, I believe that it's the Lord doing this, but oftentimes there's stuff, he puts the things in our backyards that we need. And it's really, yeah, it's really, the number of times that happens has really blown me away. So kind of a fun little.
So you didn't make a homeopathic?
No. Yeah, we did an extraction, I think in vodka, if I remember correctly, yeah. I am a hands-on learner, so most of class today is going to be workshop style, but I do want to get you guys set up with a little bit of a base so that you feel comfortable for those that are new, or even if you've been in this, I want to set the stage, a little bit of what we're doing and the philosophy behind it. So we'll start off with a definition. Herbalism is the art and the science of supporting the body into balance through the use of plants and other organisms too. When we say herb, we mean mostly plants, but some of herbs are mushrooms. So like reishi mushroom, you maybe have heard of, turkey tail, that sort of thing. Or they might be protease, algae, lichen, that sort of thing. But most of the herbs, I think everything that we're going to use today is in the plant category. But when we think about a definition of herbalism, a philosophy of herbalism, even in me saying that statement, it sounds pretty different than what we would expect to hear from our doctor, maybe in a more conventional setting, right? So we talk about balance and we talk about art and science, like all of those words don't really fit in the Western medicine paradigm. And I want to explore that a little bit because for those of us who are coming from a Western medicine base, which I think is all of us, we're at least relatively indoctrinated into it, we have to get out of that mindset in order to practice herbalism appropriately. So when we talk about science and art, from the science standpoint, we have generations of information about herbalism. Herbalism started about 5,000 years ago. It's been around for a long time, and it's been evolving, and people have been learning things and documenting things over that entire time. So we have that information to draw off of. We also have clinical trials. They need to be vetted because there's often an agenda behind where the money is coming from for those clinical trials. So that has to be, thoughtfully considered, but it is valuable information. So all of that is really important from a scientific standpoint, but then when we talk about an art standpoint, this is where herbalism really becomes a little bit of its own thing compared to Western medicine. When we talk about it as an art, we're thinking about the body holistically. So not just like cardiovascular system relating to the lymphatic system, for example, but also how does like our emotional well-being connect to those bodily systems. And there is like data behind that, but it's a little bit more of a sensory thing. It's an observation thing that we're, engaging with as herbalists. So each body is going to have a very unique experience. I'm going to have certain things going on in my nervous system that you might not have, even though we might have the same symptoms. And so those things have to be considered as we're, thinking about a preparation to address those imbalances. So that artistic side that you kind of would have as a sense or intuition is the word I'm looking for. Yeah, there's that component that is often not found in Western medicine that is really important in herbalism. If we forget that and we approach herbalism only from a science standpoint, we've reduced it down to you have a headache, therefore you need this herb, which is not the case. If you have a headache from tension, or if you have a headache from poor circulation, you need different herbs. If we divorce herbalism in the sense of getting rid of the science and you just have the art, this is where people call herbalism woo-woo. That's why they say that, because sometimes people do that. Then you're either using herbs that are unsafe or you're not doing anything for the body. You know, you're not going to see any results. Does that make sense, holding that tension? It's kind of hard for me at least, to wrap my mind around it sometimes. And I'm constantly reminding myself, no, okay, how do I think about this in the correct way? Because I don't want to get into that mindset of symptoms, one size fits all. Does that make sense? With traditional Chinese medicine. Is that one familiar? Okay, cool. That one's from China. Big surprise. That one's also very old, very similarly rooted in its foundation. Both of those are associated with different modalities like acupuncture, gua sha, if you're familiar with that, cupping, those kinds of things. Each one of those practices has herbalism as a big percentage of what it's doing, but they have other modalities as well. And then we have Western herbalism. Is that one familiar? No. Okay. So that one is kind of a mishmash of everything, because it started in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, but due to colonialism and all the things, it's kind of taken on a mind of its own. It's different in South America, in certain countries, than it is here in Texas. But it is based in traditions from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Personally, I practice most of the things that I do through Western herbalism, because it's a lot of the plants that we have in the States, because a lot of our plants, including plantain, came from Europe. So it matches a little bit more what's accessible for me. But I do use different things like gua sha and cupping and that sort of thing. Sometimes herbs from Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine. I want to go back to talking a little bit more about the intersection of herbalism and allopathic medicine. Allopathic medicine is Western medicine. Is that familiar? Okay. So Western medicine, I'm probably going to reduce it way down, too simply. It's more than this, but for the sake of clarity, what I see as a strength for allopathic or Western medicine is really in a life-saving situation. Before Western medicine, if somebody had a heart attack, it was kind of like, here, we'll try, but good luck. Same with like hemorrhaging, or if there was an infection that started to go septic or anything like that. A lot of people died before it. And so Jess will tell you, we've been friends a long time. She will tell you, I've had my times where I'm like, forget Western medicine. I'm never going to a doctor again. I hate this. So I've had those moments, and I'm sure some of you can relate to that, but I really believe that there is a place for it. It's just that it's overstepped. And I believe, I'm getting into my own personal beliefs. You guys can make the decision however you want. But from my perspective, it's overstepped. And it's being applied in places where it's not strong. It's not a good solution. My issue was gut related, and not once did a Western doctor ask me what I was eating. And I was still eating flavored blasted goldfish. So no wonder I felt terrible. But herbalism, in contrast, is going to be much safer, it is safer, but it's much gentler and it's much more slower acting, and it's getting to the root causes of things. Western medicine, because it's life-saving medicine, is very, very much about symptom suppression. When you're in a heart attack situation, you have to suppress your symptoms to survive. Same with an infection. You have to get that infection under control or you're done. That's not the case when you have IBS. I have to work through the root cause if I'm ever going to hope to live a comfortable life, which is why herbalism was so successful for me. So hopefully you're kind of seeing that they can exist, but you as an individual have to decide, where is your line? And as you learn and talk to people, like talk to each other, talk to me, talk to your medical practitioner, hopefully find a medical practitioner that's comfortable holding these things in tension. They're rare, but they're there. And find the line that you're comfortable drawing and stick to it. When you're sick, that's not the time you want to be thinking through the pros and cons about everything. Have a plan. And that's an important piece of safety. So for me, I'll tell you, for example, my husband is very allergic to fire ants. And so if he gets bit, he quickly gets a really bad infection and he started to get the red line of death. Thankfully, he had a friend over who was a nurse who saw it and caught it in time, and he went to the ER and he's fine. But when he starts getting a really bad infection, we don't mess around. We give him Right now, or in the past, we've given him steroids and antibiotics, which I don't like. But when he starts going septic, it's high risk. So for him, that's the best scenario. For me, I'm not allergic to fire ants. So I use plantain and maybe a little bit of an antibiotic, herbal antibiotic cream. And then I'm usually good to go. So it's about, you can't have a plan for every scenario, but kind of starting to think through, how might I use this? How might I use herbalism? And figure out where you want to draw your line. And that will change over time. Does that make sense? It's kind of hard. It means that we have to take a little bit more ownership over our own bodies, which is something I could get on a soapbox, and I'm sure some of you guys could get on a soapbox about this, but that's one of the problems with our current medical system is we've decided to give that authority over our bodies or that responsibility over our bodies to somebody else. And herbalism is a little bit of taking that back, learning how to be intuitive with your body, what your body needs, and take responsibility for how you're going to care for it rather than giving that responsibility to somebody else. Kind of hard, but I found it to be really empowering. It's really fun. And it's really rewarding when you can find things that really help you. So we've already talked a little bit about safety in finding, coming up with a plan, deciding how you want to handle herbalism versus Western medicine. But there are a few other things. That's one of the big things people will say is herbs aren't those dangerous? Like, I don't really trust that. They're very safe if you use them wisely. First of all, make sure you're, paying attention to the dose and not going crazy on doses. Use recipes, that sort of thing. If you're buying, like tinctures from Herb Farm or other places, abide by their dosing guidelines. It's just kind of wisdom there. But I would also say research diligently. So know what herbs you're using. Make sure you cross-check those herbs. We have common names for plants, like plantain is a common name, but then you have a Latin name. And common names vary by culture, but Latin names are always the same. So you always want to double check that when you're buying an herb and using a recipe. Make sure those things match so that you get the right thing. But you also need to know, do you have any allergies? Are you on any pharmaceuticals? That's fine if you are. Are you on any therapies, like maybe radiation treatment or anything like that, that might cause you to be, extra sensitive to a certain type of herb? Know those things and then be thoughtful with that when you're preparing herbs. Same if you're talking to somebody else about it. Ask them those kinds of questions because they might not be thinking about that. And then we also want to be very careful when we're practicing herbalism with those who are pregnant or breastfeeding, especially kids under the age of 3. Their bodies are in a different state. They're a little more sensitive to things. Things can, hurt the baby and that sort of thing. So we want to be careful with that. In your resource packet, if that's helpful for anybody, if anyone's like thinking about a family member or themselves in that scenario, in the resource packet, there's a book by Aviva Ram. She's a really great holistic, I don't know if she's a midwife, but she kind of operates in that birth space. And she has a great book that's about, kind of being careful in that scenario.
So you question herbalism versus like vitamins. Where do you cross over there?
Such a great question. I'm glad you asked that. Personally, for me, I'm all about whole food, whole plant medicine. I think there's a lot of wisdom when we take the whole plant as it was, made in nature, because there's so many different chemicals, safe chemicals, but so many different chemicals in a plant that when they interact together, there's a level of safety that we have. A lot of pharmaceuticals are actually based on little chemical constituents being isolated from plants, like aspirin is that way. And then that's where we start to get some of the side effects because we don't have all the other constituents. So I kind of feel the same way about vitamins. Like, I don't think they're as scary to me as some of the pharmaceuticals are, but they're divorced from their whole food. So like for vitamin E, I would rather eat beef tallow than take a vitamin E supplement because it's going to be supported by a whole host of other things that are going to make it more bioavailable for my body, but also lead to a mineral balance. There's like some wisdom in how the foods are designed that I'm not an expert on this, so I don't really have a great example, but I know that there are certain vitamins that you need certain ratios with other ones to get maximum absorption. And in the food, if they're from nutrient-dense sources, they are that way. So it takes a little bit of the guesswork out for me.